I caught my wife cheating with my cousin after he lived with us for 3 months and she got pregnant, but when I refused to raise another man's baby she accused him of harassment and both of them wanted me to lie in court to save them from the consequences of their own actions. For context, our marriage lasted 11 of those years. My wife Gabriella, 36F, and I, 38M, got married 3 years after we started dating. The wedding was small. Just immediate family and a handful of friends. Her parents paid for most of it. My parents contributed what they could. The first few years were good. We lived in a small apartment in the city. I worked for a construction firm. She worked at a clinic doing intake assessments. We had a routine. Friday nights were pizza and movies. Saturdays were for errands and cooking together. Sundays were lazy. We would sleep in and make breakfast late in the afternoon. Around year 4 of the marriage, we started trying for kids. Nothing happened. We tried for 2 years. She went to her doctor. I went to mine. The tests came back unclear. Not impossible but not likely either. The doctors used words like suboptimal and challenging. We stopped trying after a while. It became too much. The monthly disappointment. The awkward conversations with family who kept asking when we would have kids. We got a dog instead. A golden retriever named Biscuit. Gabriella found him at a shelter. He was 3 years old and had been returned twice by previous owners. She cried when she first held him. We took him home that same day. Biscuit became our focus. We bought a house with a yard for him. It was a 2-story place in the suburbs. The mortgage was more than we wanted to pay, but Gabriella said Biscuit deserved space to run. For a while everything felt stable again. We had the house. We had the dog. We had our jobs. I got promoted to project manager. She moved to a better clinic with better pay. We went on vacation once a year. Nothing fancy. Just a week at a beach town or a cabin in the mountains. We talked about normal things. Work. The neighbors. What to have for dinner. My cousin Ronan, 34M, moved to the city about 3 years ago. He had been living in another state working sales jobs. He never stayed anywhere long. He would call every few months asking to borrow money or needing a place to crash for a week. My father always said Ronan needed structure. My mother said Ronan needed to grow up. Gabriella met him twice before he moved here. Once at a family reunion and once at Thanksgiving. She said he seemed charming but unfocused. When Ronan moved to the city he asked if he could stay with us for a month while he found an apartment. I said yes. Gabriella was not happy about it, but she did not argue. Ronan arrived with 2 suitcases and a gym bag. He slept in the guest room. He promised he would be out in 4 weeks. 4 weeks turned into 3 months. He got a job selling insurance. He said he was saving for a deposit. Gabriella started complaining. She said Ronan left his dishes in the sink. She said he used all the hot water. She said he never bought groceries even though he ate our food. I talked to Ronan. He apologized and said he would do better. He did for about a week. Then it went back to how it was before. Gabriella stopped complaining after a while. She just started spending more time in our bedroom. She would go upstairs right after dinner. She said she had work to catch up on. I did not think much of it. Ronan finally moved out after 3 months. He found a studio apartment across town. He came by once a week for dinner. Gabriella seemed fine with it. She would cook extra and set a place for him. They talked about shows they were both watching. She recommended books to him. He asked her advice about his job. It seemed normal. Family dinners. Nothing strange. About 6 months after Ronan moved out I started noticing small changes. Gabriella stopped leaving her phone on the kitchen counter. She started taking it everywhere. Even to the bathroom. When I asked about it she said she was trying to reduce her screen time by keeping it out of reach. That did not make sense but I let it go. She also started working late more often. 2 or 3 nights a week she would text and say she had to stay for a patient emergency or paperwork. She would get home after 9. She would eat leftovers standing at the counter and then go straight to bed. We stopped having our Friday movie nights. She said she was too tired. The physical affection changed too. She still kissed me goodbye in the morning. But it was quick. A peck on the cheek while she was already halfway out the door. She still hugged me when I got home from work. But the hugs were shorter. Her arms barely wrapped around me. When I tried to hold her longer she would pull away and say she needed to start dinner or let Biscuit out. I thought maybe she was going through something. Stress at work. Maybe hormones. I did not know. I tried to help. I made her favorite meals. Chicken parmesan on Wednesdays. Pasta carbonara on Saturdays. I left notes on the bathroom mirror. Simple things. Reminders that I loved her. She thanked me but nothing changed. One night I woke up at 2 in the morning. Gabriella was not in bed. I went downstairs. She was sitting on the couch with her phone. The light from the screen lit up her face. She was smiling. When she saw me she locked the phone and put it face down on the cushion. She said she could not sleep and was just scrolling through social media. I went back to bed. She came up 10 minutes later. The next week her phone went off at midnight. I was half asleep but I heard it. A text notification. I looked over. The screen was bright. I saw the name. Ronan. The message preview said something about missing someone and pulling something off and talking about next week. I sat up. I read it again. Gabriella was asleep next to me. I did not wake her. I got out of bed and went to the living room. I sat there until morning. When Gabriella woke up, I was already dressed and sitting at the kitchen table. She came downstairs in her robe. She poured coffee and asked if I wanted eggs. I told her I saw the text from Ronan. She froze. She did not turn around. She just stood there holding the coffee pot. Then she asked what I thought I saw. I repeated the message. She put the coffee pot down. She sat across from me. She asked if I read her phone while she was sleeping. I said no. I said the notification woke me up. She did not say anything for a minute. Then she started crying. Not loud. Just tears running down her face. She wiped them with her sleeve. She told me she was pregnant. I did not understand at first. We had not been intimate in over 2 months. She saw the confusion on my face. She said it was Ronan. She said it happened over the course of several weeks. She said they had been meeting at his apartment. She said it started as just talking. Then it became more. She said she did not plan it. She said it just happened. I asked how far along she was. She said 8 weeks. I asked if she was sure it was his. She nodded. She said there was no one else. She said I was the only other person and the timeline did not match. I asked why Ronan sent that text. She said they had a doctor appointment scheduled. She said he wanted to be involved. She said he wanted to go to the ultrasounds. Then she said something I did not expect. She asked if I would stay. She said she wanted to raise the baby together. She said Ronan could be the uncle. She said no one had to know. She said we could tell people it was ours. She said it was a miracle after all the years of trying. She said we could finally be a family. I stood up. I went upstairs. I packed a bag. Clothes. Toiletries. My laptop. She followed me. She kept talking. She said she made a mistake. She said it did not mean anything. She said Ronan was just there and I was always working. She said I had been distant. She said I did not notice her anymore. I did not respond. I zipped the bag and walked past her. She grabbed my arm. I pulled away. I left the house. I got in my car. I drove to my friend Jake's apartment. He was confused when I showed up, but he let me stay. I turned off my phone. I stayed at Jake's place for 2 days. I slept on his couch. I did not eat much. Jake did not ask questions. On the 3rd day I turned my phone back on. There were 63 messages. Most were from Gabriella. Some were from my father. A few were from my aunt. There was one from Ronan. I read Ronan's first. He said I was being dramatic. He said I needed to calm down. He said Gabriella was going through a hard time and I abandoned her. He said I was being selfish. He said we were all adults and we needed to talk. I read my father's messages. He said Gabriella called him. She told him she was pregnant and I left. She said she had complications and needed support. She said I walked out during a medical crisis. My father said I needed to come home. He said I had responsibilities. He said Gabriella needed me. He did not mention Ronan at all. I called Jake's girlfriend Savannah. She was close with Gabriella's sister. I asked Savannah if she knew anything. Savannah said Gabriella told her sister that I left because I was upset about the pregnancy. She said Gabriella did not mention Ronan. She said Gabriella told people I had doubts about being a father. Savannah asked what actually happened. I told her. Savannah went quiet. Then she said she would talk to Gabriella's sister. Ronan called me that evening. He was laughing when I answered. He said I was taking this too personally. He said Gabriella and I had problems already. He said he just happened to be there. He said I should be an adult about it. He said Gabriella needed stability and I was making everything worse by hiding. I hung up. Update 1: A lot happened since I posted. I am still at Jake's place. I paid him rent for the month. He said I did not have to, but I insisted. About 5 days after I left, Gabriella called me from a different number. I did not recognize it, so I answered. She was crying. She said she needed to talk. She said Ronan took advantage of her. She said he manipulated her when she was vulnerable. She said he pressured her into the affair. She said she filed a complaint with the police. She said she was claiming it was not consensual. I did not know what to say. I asked if that was true. She said it was complicated. She said Ronan knew she was unhappy. She said he used it against her. She said he made her think I did not care about her anymore. I told her I could not help her. She started yelling. She said I was supposed to support her. She said I was her husband. I hung up. The next day I got a call from a mutual friend named Georgia. She worked with Gabriella at the clinic. Georgia said Ronan showed up at Gabriella's workplace. He was angry. He confronted Gabriella in the parking lot. Georgia said other staff had to intervene. Georgia said Ronan was yelling that Gabriella was lying. He said they had been planning the pregnancy together. He said Gabriella wanted to leave me and be with him. Georgia also told me that Gabriella filed paperwork claiming Ronan harassed her and used his position as family to manipulate her into the relationship. The complaint alleged that Ronan coerced her over several months. It claimed emotional abuse and exploitation. Ronan was served with a restraining order. He could not contact Gabriella. He could not come within 500 feet of her workplace or our house. 2 days later Ronan called me again. This time he was not laughing. He was frantic. He said Gabriella was destroying his life. He said she was lying to protect herself. He said they had text messages proving it was mutual. He said they had planned the baby together. He said Gabriella wanted to tell me after the first trimester. He said she only flipped when I found out early. He begged me to vouch for him. He said I knew Gabriella. He said I knew she was manipulative. He said she was doing this to save her reputation. He sent me screenshots of their texts. Messages about love. Messages about leaving me. Messages about starting over together. Messages about baby names. I did not respond. Ronan called 4 more times that day. He left voicemails. In one he was crying. He said his job put him on leave pending investigation. He said his lawyer needed a statement from me. He said I was the only one who could prove Gabriella was lying. He said I had to tell people that Gabriella had been distant from me for months. He said I had to confirm she was capable of planning this. My father called me the next week. He said he talked to Ronan. He said Ronan told him the truth about the affair. My father asked me what really happened. I told him exactly what Gabriella said. I told him what Ronan said. I told him I did not know who was lying. My father said Ronan was family. He said Ronan made a mistake but he should not go to prison for it. I told my father I was not getting involved. My father said that as a man I had a responsibility to protect Ronan from a false accusation. He said even if Ronan crossed a line it was between 2 adults. He said Gabriella was weaponizing the system. I told my father I was not interested in taking sides. My father said I was abandoning family. I said Ronan stopped being my family when he slept with my wife. My father hung up. Gabriella's friends started posting online. Vague posts about men who cannot handle strong women. Posts about women being punished for leaving bad relationships. Posts about how society blames women for everything. The posts did not name me but people who knew us understood. I got messages from acquaintances asking if I was okay. Asking if the rumors were true. Asking if I really abandoned Gabriella while she was pregnant. A lawyer contacted me. He represented Ronan. He asked if I would provide a character statement. He said it would help prove Gabriella was not being truthful. He said the statement could just confirm that Gabriella and I had marital problems before Ronan was involved. He said it would show Gabriella had motive to lie. I did not respond to the email. Ronan showed up at my work one afternoon. He was waiting in the parking lot. He looked terrible. He had not shaved. His clothes were wrinkled. He walked up to my car. He said he was sorry. He said he never meant for any of this to happen. He said Gabriella convinced him I did not love her anymore. He said Gabriella told him we were going to divorce anyway. He said the court case was moving forward. He said if he got convicted, he could face jail time. He said his lawyer told him that without a witness to counter Gabriella's claims it would be hard to defend. He said I was the only person who saw how Gabriella acted before and after. He said I could save him. I reminded him of something he said on the phone weeks earlier. He called me predictable. He said I was pathetic for not seeing what was happening. I told him I hoped the courtroom was kinder to him than he was to me. I got in my car. He stood there. I drove away. Update 2: the divorce papers were filed. I hired a lawyer. The process started. Gabriella did not contest it. She signed everything without argument. The house was put up for sale. We had joint ownership so we had to agree on the listing price. She wanted to keep it. She said she needed stability for the baby. I said no. The house sold in 3 weeks. The market was good. We split the proceeds. My aunt called me. She is my father's sister. She said the family was upset with me. She said Ronan was struggling. She said his reputation was ruined. She said people at his work treated him differently even though the charges had not been proven. She said I should have defended him. She said even if he made a mistake, it did not mean his life should be over. I asked my aunt if she would have said the same thing if Ronan had done this to her daughter. She said that was different. I asked how. She said I was being difficult. She said men have to stick together because women will always weaponize their emotions. I told her I was not interested in continuing the conversation. She called me a coward before I hung up. Gabriella sent me a message through her lawyer. She wanted to know if I would attend one of the prenatal appointments. She said it would look better for her case if I was involved. She said people were asking why her husband was not supporting her during the pregnancy. I told my lawyer to respond that I would not be participating in anything related to the child. Ronan's case went to a preliminary hearing. I did not attend. Jake told me he saw it mentioned in a local news article. The article was small. Just a few paragraphs. It did not name anyone but it referenced a harassment case involving a familial relationship. Jake said the comments section was full of people arguing about whether the woman was lying or the man was guilty. My mother called. She lives in another state. She and my father divorced when I was in high school. She asked how I was. I told her I was managing. She said my father called her. She said he tried to convince her to talk to me. She told him to leave her out of it. She said she was sorry this happened. She said I did not deserve any of it. She did not tell me what to do. She just listened. Gabriella's sister contacted me through social media. She said she heard my side from Savannah. She said she did not know Gabriella had been unfaithful. She said Gabriella told the family that Ronan forced himself on her. She said Gabriella told them I left because I could not handle the trauma of what happened to her. She asked if that was true. I told her no. I told her Gabriella asked me to raise the baby as mine. Gabriella's sister said she did not know what to believe anymore. I moved out of Jake's place. I found a small rental house about 40 minutes outside the city. It had one bedroom and a small yard. The rent was cheaper than what I was paying Jake. The area was quiet. There were walking trails nearby. I started going for walks in the evenings. Biscuit stayed with Gabriella. She said she needed him for emotional support. I did not fight her on it. Ronan sent a final message. It was an email. He said I was the reason his life was falling apart. He said if I had just backed him up none of this would have happened. He said Gabriella was going to win because I chose to stay silent. He said I was worse than her because I had the power to stop it and I chose not to. He said he would never forgive me. I blocked his email. Update 3: The divorce was finalized last month. It took longer than expected because of the property division and some disagreements about shared debts. My lawyer handled most of it. I did not have to see Gabriella in person. Everything was done through legal counsel and email. The house sold and the money was divided. I used my half to pay off my car and put the rest into savings. I bought some furniture for the rental house. A couch. A bed. A kitchen table. Nothing fancy. Just functional. Ronan's case is still ongoing. I do not follow it. I do not check the news. I do not ask people for updates. A few family members tried to bring it up during a phone call. I told them I was not discussing it. Some of them stopped calling after that. My father has not spoken to me in 3 months. My aunt sends occasional messages saying I should reconsider my position. I do not reply. Gabriella had the baby 2 weeks ago. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it in passing. I did not ask for details. I do not know if it was a boy or a girl. I do not know if Ronan is involved. I do not know if Gabriella is raising the child alone. It does not affect me. My relationship with my father's side of the family is effectively over. My uncle tried to mediate. He said family should not be divided like this. He said I should consider forgiveness. I told him there was nothing to forgive because no one wronged me by taking a side. They made their choice. I made mine. My mother's side has been supportive. My mother calls once a week. She does not ask about Gabriella or Ronan. She asks about my job. She asks if I'm eating. She asks if the house is comfortable. Normal things. Her sister sent me a card for my birthday. It had a $20 bill inside like I was still a kid. It made me smile. Work has been steady. I got assigned to a new project. A commercial building downtown. The timeline is 2 years. It keeps me busy. My coworkers do not know what happened. They know I got divorced. They do not know the details. I prefer it that way. I still take walks in the evenings. The trails near the house go through a wooded area. There is a pond about a mile in. I sit there sometimes. I do not think about Gabriella. I do not think about Ronan. I do not think about the baby. I just sit. People ask if I regret not helping Ronan. They ask if I feel guilty for staying neutral. The answer is no. Ronan made a choice. Gabriella made a choice. They both tried to pull me into their mess. I refused. That is not cruelty. That is self-preservation. The last message I got from Gabriella was 3 weeks ago. She sent it through a mutual friend. It said I was being cruel by not backing her up. It said she needed me to confirm her story. It said I owed her that much after everything. I did not respond. The mutual friend asked if I wanted to send anything back. I said no. I do not owe Gabriella anything. I do not owe Ronan anything. They both asked me to lie for them. They both wanted me to pick a side in their war. I chose not to participate. They can handle the consequences of their actions without me. I am not angry anymore. I was for a while. In the beginning I would lie awake replaying everything. The texts. The conversations. The moment she asked me to raise another man's child. It felt like betrayal and insult combined. But anger takes energy. It requires you to keep caring. I do not care anymore. The life I had with Gabriella is gone. The family connections on my father's side are gone. The house is gone. Biscuit is gone. I do not miss any of it. That version of my life ended the night I saw that text message. Everything after that was just cleaning up the remains. I have a job. I have a place to live. I have family members who do not expect me to compromise my boundaries for their comfort. That is enough. I am not looking for reconciliation. I am not hoping Ronan learns a lesson or Gabriella admits the truth. I am not waiting for my father to apologize. I am just living. People who hear the story want a resolution. They want to know who won. They want to know if justice was served. There is no resolution. Ronan and Gabriella are still fighting their case. My father still thinks I made the wrong choice. My aunt still sends messages about family loyalty. Nothing is resolved. But it also is not my problem anymore. I blocked Ronan months ago. I blocked Gabriella after the divorce was final. I blocked my father after he called me selfish for the 4th time. I did not block them out of anger. I blocked them because I was done. Done explaining. Done justifying. Done being asked to fix something I did not break. Some nights I sit on the porch of the rental house. It faces the street. There is a street light that flickers. I keep meaning to report it, but I never do. I drink coffee even though it is late. I watch cars pass. I do not think about what I lost. I think about what I avoided. I avoided raising a child that was not mine while pretending everything was fine. I avoided being dragged into a court case that had nothing to do with me. I avoided letting people use me as a shield for their lies. The rental house has a basement. I set up a small workshop down there. I build things with wood. Shelves. Boxes. Small furniture. It keeps my hands busy. I do not sell anything. I just build. When I finish something, I either keep it or give it away to neighbors. It does not matter. The point is the process. I am not starting over. I am just continuing. The part of my life with Gabriella was one chapter. This is another. It is quieter. There is less drama. There are fewer people. That is fine. I do not need a lot of people. I need people who do not ask me to betray myself for their benefit. Everyone else can stay where they are. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. I found my niece sleeping alone upstairs while my sister partied at a wedding. When I called security, my entire family turned against me. What happened next proved I was right all along. I need some perspective on what happened at my cousin's wedding last weekend. I'm Andrew, 28M, and this involves my sister Becky, 32F, and her daughter Aurora, 8F. For context, my family has always been close-knit. Becky and I grew up together, and even though we had our typical sibling fights, we've maintained a decent relationship as adults. She got married young at 22 to her husband Tom, 35M, and they had Aurora when Becky was 24. Tom works in construction and travels frequently for projects, so Becky often handles most of the parenting duties alone. Becky has always been the type of person who needs constant social interaction. Even back in high school, she couldn't stand being alone and always had to be surrounded by friends. After Aurora was born, I noticed she struggled with the isolation that comes with being a new mom. She would often drop Aurora off at our parents' house for entire weekends, claiming she needed a break. Our parents, being the doting grandparents they are, never complained and were happy to help. Over the years, I've noticed some concerning patterns with how Becky handles her responsibilities as a mother. She would frequently show up to family gatherings late because she forgot she was supposed to bring Aurora, or she would leave Aurora with whoever was available while she went off to socialize. Our parents and other family members always stepped in, so Aurora never seemed to suffer for it. Aurora is a sweet, well-behaved kid who has learned to be quite independent for her age. The wedding in question was for our cousin Sarah, 26F, who was marrying her longtime boyfriend at a beautiful vineyard venue about 2 hours from our hometown. Sarah had specifically requested that this be an adults-only celebration, but she made an exception for the immediate family's children, which included Aurora and 2 other young cousins. The venue was quite large, with the ceremony area, reception hall, and several outdoor spaces spread across the property. Becky had been talking about this wedding for months. She bought a new dress, got her hair done professionally, and seemed more excited about this event than I had seen her in years. Tom couldn't attend because he was working on a project in another state, so Becky was flying solo with Aurora. The day of the wedding started normally enough. The ceremony was beautiful, and Aurora sat quietly between Becky and our mom during the service. After the ceremony, we had cocktail hour in the garden area while the bridal party took photos. This is where things started to go sideways. During cocktail hour, Becky immediately gravitated toward a group of our college friends who had also been invited. These were people she hadn't seen in years, and she was clearly thrilled to reconnect with them. Aurora stayed close to our parents initially, but after about 30 minutes, I noticed she was wandering around the garden area by herself while Becky was deep in conversation and laughter with her old friends. I didn't think much of it at first. The venue seemed safe enough, and there were plenty of family members around. However, as cocktail hour progressed, I noticed that Becky hadn't checked on Aurora once. She was completely absorbed in catching up with everyone and seemed to have forgotten that her daughter was even there. When we moved into the reception hall for dinner, I assumed Becky would collect Aurora and they would sit together at our assigned family table. Instead, Becky asked our mom if Aurora could sit with her and our dad so that Becky could sit with her college friends at a different table. Our mom agreed, as she always does, and Aurora ended up at the grandparents' table while Becky moved to a table across the room. During dinner, Becky was animated and loud, clearly having the time of her life. She was drinking wine, laughing constantly, and taking numerous photos with her friends. Meanwhile, Aurora sat quietly with our elderly grandparents, picking at her chicken and looking around the room. I was at the head table as part of the wedding party, so I couldn't really intervene, but I kept glancing over at both of them throughout the meal. After dinner, the dancing began. The DJ started with some slower songs for the older guests, then gradually moved into more upbeat music. Becky was one of the first people on the dance floor, and she stayed there for the next 2 hours straight. She was dancing with various friends, taking group photos, and generally living it up. During this entire time, Aurora was sitting alone at the now empty grandparents' table because our elderly grandparents had retired to their hotel room for the evening. I checked on Aurora a few times during the dancing. She seemed tired but said she was okay when I asked. I offered to take her to find Becky, but she just shrugged and said her mom was having fun. This response bothered me more than I can explain. An 8-year-old shouldn't be so resigned to being ignored by her parent. Around 10 p.m., I noticed that Aurora was no longer at the table. I looked around the reception hall but couldn't see her anywhere. I checked the bathroom, the lobby area, and even went outside to look around the gardens. After about 15 minutes of searching, I started to panic. The venue was large and had multiple levels, plus it was completely dark outside by then. I finally found Aurora in a small lounge area on the second floor of the venue. She was curled up on a couch, fast asleep. She had apparently wandered upstairs looking for a quiet place to rest and had fallen asleep alone. The lounge area was completely empty and dimly lit. Anyone could have walked in there. When I found her, I immediately went to look for Becky. She was still on the dance floor, now with her shoes off, dancing to some pop song with her college friends. She was clearly intoxicated, though not falling down drunk. When I approached her and told her I needed to talk to her about Aurora, she waved me off and said she would catch up with me later. I had to physically take her arm and pull her aside to get her attention. When I told her that Aurora had been sleeping alone upstairs and that I had been looking for her for 20 minutes, Becky's response was to laugh and say that Aurora was fine and knew how to take care of herself. She then tried to pull me onto the dance floor with her. I told Becky that she needed to go get Aurora and figure out sleeping arrangements for the night. We were all staying at the same hotel about 10 minutes from the venue, and it was already past 10:30 p.m. Becky told me that Aurora could sleep in the hotel room while she stayed at the wedding until it ended. She planned to get a ride back with one of her friends later. This is when I lost my patience. I told Becky that she couldn't leave an 8-year-old alone in a hotel room while she partied until 2 a.m. Becky got defensive and said that Aurora had stayed alone before and that I was being overdramatic. She said Aurora would be fine for a few hours and that she deserved to have fun for once. When I realized Becky wasn't going to listen to reason, I went to find venue security. I explained the situation to the head of security, a professional-looking woman in her 40s. I told her that there was an 8-year-old child who had been left unattended by her parent, and that the parent was planning to leave the child alone in a hotel room while she continued drinking at the wedding. The security officer took the situation seriously and asked me to show her where Aurora was sleeping. When we got upstairs, Aurora was still curled up on the couch, completely dead to the world. The security officer took photos for documentation and then asked me to bring her to the parent in question. When we approached Becky on the dance floor, the security officer identified herself and asked to speak with Becky privately. Becky immediately became belligerent, asking why security was bothering her and what business it was of theirs. The security officer explained that leaving a child unattended at a venue and planning to leave that child alone in a hotel room could constitute child endangerment. Becky turned on me and started yelling that I was trying to ruin her night and that I had no right to call security on her. She said I didn't understand what it was like being a single parent most of the time and that she was entitled to have fun. Several other wedding guests stopped dancing and started staring at the commotion. The security officer remained calm and professional. She explained that the venue had a policy about unattended minors and that they were required to report situations like this to local authorities if the parent refused to take responsibility. She gave Becky the option to either make appropriate arrangements for Aurora's care or face having the situation reported to police. At this point, our parents appeared, having been alerted by other family members about the disturbance. Our mom immediately went to collect Aurora from upstairs while our dad tried to mediate the situation with Becky and the security officer. Becky was now crying and accusing everyone of ganging up on her and ruining the best night she'd had in years. The security officer agreed not to file a report as long as Aurora was placed in the care of responsible adults for the remainder of the evening. Our parents agreed to take Aurora back to their hotel room, and Becky was allowed to stay at the wedding. However, the damage was done. The entire family was now aware of what had happened, and the mood was completely ruined. Becky ended up leaving the wedding about an hour later, but not before confronting me again and accusing me of humiliating her in front of everyone. She said I had overreacted and that calling security was extreme and unnecessary. She claimed that Aurora was never in any real danger and that I had made the situation seem worse than it was. The rest of the family has been divided on whether I did the right thing. Our parents think I overreacted and should have just handled it within the family. Some cousins agree with me that Becky was being irresponsible, while others think I embarrassed her unnecessarily. Even the bride, Sarah, later told me she wished I had found a way to handle it more discreetly since it disrupted her wedding. Aurora ended up sleeping in our parents' hotel room that night, and Becky picked her up the next morning to drive home. Becky has been giving me the silent treatment ever since, and she's told other family members that I betrayed her and made her look like a bad mother in front of everyone. I keep second-guessing myself. Maybe I should have just taken Aurora back to the hotel myself instead of involving security. Maybe I should have been more patient with Becky and tried harder to make her understand the situation. But I also can't shake the image of Aurora sleeping alone upstairs while her mother partied downstairs, completely oblivious to where her child was. AITA for calling security on my sister instead of handling this situation within the family? Update 1. I wasn't planning to update this post, but some things have happened that I think people who commented might want to know about. First, thank you to everyone who took the time to respond to my original post. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive, which helped me feel less guilty about how I handled the situation. However, things in my family have gotten much more complicated since then. After the wedding, Becky maintained her silent treatment with me for about 2 weeks. During this time, she was telling other family members her version of events, which was significantly different from what actually happened. According to Becky's story, I'd called security on her because Aurora had briefly wandered off during the reception, and I had blown the whole thing out of proportion because I don't have kids and don't understand how parenting works. She was also telling people that the security officer had been rude and aggressive with her, and that I had deliberately tried to humiliate her in front of her college friends whom she rarely gets to see. In her version, Aurora was never actually in any danger, and I had made a mountain out of a molehill because I was jealous that she was having fun. I found out about these alternative facts when my Aunt Linda, 56F, who wasn't at the wedding, called me to ask why I had been so cruel to Becky. Linda explained that Becky had called her crying, saying that I had treated her like an unfit mother and had gotten her in trouble with security for no reason. According to what Becky told Linda, Aurora had been with our parents most of the evening, and I had called security because Aurora went to the bathroom by herself. This phone call made me realize that Becky was actively working to turn the family against me. I decided I needed to set the record straight before her version became the accepted truth. I called a family meeting with my parents, my other Aunt Carol, 52F, and my Uncle Jim, 58M, who had all been at the wedding and witnessed at least part of what happened. During this family meeting, I asked each of them to share what they had actually seen that night. My parents admitted that they had noticed Becky wasn't paying attention to Aurora during the reception, but they said they assumed I or someone else was keeping an eye on her. My Aunt Carol said she had seen Aurora sleeping upstairs and had wondered where Becky was. My Uncle Jim said he had witnessed Becky's confrontation with security and thought Becky had been drinking too much. When I laid out the timeline of events, Aurora sleeping alone upstairs for at least 20 minutes while Becky partied, Becky's plan to leave Aurora alone in a hotel room until 2 a.m., and Becky's refusal to take the situation seriously, my family members started to see the bigger picture. However, their response wasn't what I expected. Instead of being concerned about Becky's behavior, they started talking about how we all needed to support her better. My mom said that Becky had been struggling since Tom started traveling more for work, and that maybe we hadn't been doing enough to help her cope with single parenting. My dad suggested that we should have been more proactive about watching Aurora at the wedding so Becky could enjoy herself. This response frustrated me because it completely missed the point. The issue wasn't that Becky needed help with Aurora, it was that she had abdicated her parental responsibilities entirely and had put Aurora in a potentially dangerous situation. But my family seemed more interested in making excuses for Becky than addressing the real problem. Things came to a head the following week when Becky finally broke her silence with me. She called me and launched into a tirade about how I had ruined her reputation in the family and damaged her relationship with Aurora. She claimed that Aurora had been asking why Uncle Andrew had gotten Mommy in trouble with the police, and that Aurora now thought her mother was a bad person. During this phone call, Becky made several statements that really opened my eyes to how she views her role as a parent. She said that she never gets to have fun anymore because she's always stuck with Aurora while Tom is working. She said that everyone expects her to be the perfect mother 24/7, but nobody appreciates how hard it is for her. She said that one night of letting loose shouldn't define her as a parent, and that I had no right to judge her because I don't have children of my own. What really struck me was when she said that Aurora is old enough to take care of herself for a few hours and that keeping constant watch over an 8-year-old is helicopter parenting. She said that when she was Aurora's age, she was much more independent, and that kids today are too coddled. I tried to explain to Becky that the issue wasn't her wanting to have fun, it was her complete disregard for Aurora's safety and well-being. I pointed out that she hadn't checked on Aurora for over 3 hours, didn't know where Aurora was when I found her sleeping upstairs, and had planned to leave Aurora alone in a hotel room until the early morning hours. But Becky kept deflecting and making it about how hard her life is and how unfairly she's being treated. The conversation ended with Becky telling me that until I apologize for calling security and publicly humiliating her, she doesn't want to have a relationship with me. She said that my actions had consequences and that I needed to live with the fact that I had chosen to side against family. After this conversation, I started paying more attention to Becky's parenting patterns. I began asking other family members about times when Becky had left Aurora with them, and I was shocked by what I learned. Apparently, Becky regularly drops Aurora off at our parents' house with little to no notice, sometimes for entire weekends. She's also left Aurora with various cousins and aunts during family gatherings while she goes off to socialize or run errands. My Aunt Carol told me about a time last summer when Becky had dropped Aurora off for what was supposed to be a few hours so she could go shopping, but then didn't pick Aurora up until the next day. When Carol called to ask where Becky was, Becky said she had decided to stay overnight at a friend's house and hadn't thought to mention it. Aurora had spent the night in clothes she'd been wearing all day because Becky hadn't packed anything for her. My cousin Jennifer, 29F, told me about a family barbecue last spring where Becky had left Aurora at the party and driven to a different city to meet up with some old friends. She didn't come back until the next morning, and Aurora ended up sleeping over at Jennifer's house. Becky's explanation was that she had lost track of time and it was too late to drive back that night. These stories painted a picture of a pattern of behavior that went far beyond what happened at the wedding. It seemed like Becky routinely prioritized her social life over her responsibilities as a mother, and our family had been enabling this behavior by always stepping in to take care of Aurora when Becky disappeared. I also learned that Aurora has been asking our parents if she can live with him permanently. According to my mom, Aurora has said multiple times that she likes staying at Grandma and Grandpa's house better because it's quieter and they pay attention to her. This information broke my heart and made me realize that Aurora has been affected by her mother's behavior much more than any of us realized. The most disturbing revelation came from my Uncle Jim, who told me that he had once found Aurora walking alone in a parking lot outside a restaurant where our family was having dinner. Aurora had gone outside to look for Becky, who had left the restaurant with some friends without telling anyone where she was going. Aurora was only 7 at the time, and she had been wandering around a busy parking lot looking for her mother. Jim brought Aurora back inside and they waited for over an hour before Becky returned. All of these stories made me realize that what happened at the wedding wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a larger pattern of neglect and irresponsibility. Becky has been using our family as unpaid babysitters while she lives her life as if she doesn't have a child, and everyone has been too polite or too conflict-averse to address it directly. The situation has now split our family into 2 camps. My parents, Aunt Linda, and a few cousins think I should apologize to Becky and that we should all work together to support her better. My Aunt Carol, Uncle Jim, Cousin Jennifer, and a few others agree with me that Becky's behavior is problematic and needs to be addressed. Becky is still not speaking to me, and she's been limiting Aurora's contact with the family members who she feels have sided with me. Aurora hasn't been to our parents' house in over 2 weeks, which is unusual because she typically spends every weekend there. I don't regret calling security at the wedding. If anything, learning about Becky's history of behavior has convinced me that I did the right thing. But I'm worried about Aurora and what this family conflict means for her well-being. I'm also struggling with the realization that my family has been enabling neglectful parenting for years without anyone speaking up. Update 2: I need to update you all on what's been happening since my last post, because the situation has escalated in ways I never expected. About a month ago, Aurora's school contacted Becky about Aurora's declining attendance and academic performance. Apparently, Aurora had been late to school multiple times and had missed several full days without proper documentation. When the school tried to discuss this with Becky, she became defensive and blamed the school for being too rigid with their policies. The school counselor had also noticed changes in Aurora's behavior. Aurora had become withdrawn in class and had told her teacher that she often had to take care of herself in the mornings because her mom was tired. The counselor had tried to schedule a meeting with Becky to discuss these concerns, but Becky kept canceling or not showing up. I learned about this from my mom, who had been contacted by the school when they couldn't reach Becky. The school had Aurora's emergency contact information, which included my parents as secondary contacts. When the school called my parents to ask about Aurora's absences, my mom was shocked to learn that Aurora had missed so much school. My parents confronted Becky about this, and Becky's response was to blame everyone else. She said the school was targeting her because they knew she was a single mother. She claimed that Aurora's teacher didn't like her because of what happened at a parent-teacher conference earlier in the year. She said that Aurora was just going through a phase and that everyone was making a big deal out of nothing. What really concerned me was when my mom told me that Becky had said she was considering homeschooling Aurora. Becky claimed that the traditional school system wasn't working for Aurora and that she could provide better education at home. However, Becky works full-time as a receptionist at a dental office and has no teaching experience or qualifications. The idea of Becky homeschooling Aurora while also working full-time seemed completely unrealistic. Around this same time, I started noticing posts on Becky's social media that worried me. She was posting photos from bars and restaurants at all hours of the day and night, often on weekdays. In many of these photos, she was clearly intoxicated and surrounded by friends. What struck me was that these posts were happening on school nights, and there was never any mention of Aurora or any indication that Becky was concerned about getting home to her daughter. I also noticed that Becky had started dating someone new. His name is Marcus, 41M, and based on his social media profiles, he seems to have a history of short-term relationships and a lifestyle that revolves around partying and drinking. Becky started posting photos with Marcus about 3 weeks after our confrontation about the wedding, and they seemed to be spending a lot of time together at bars and clubs. The situation reached a breaking point 3 weeks ago when my parents received a call from Aurora's school saying that Aurora had not been picked up and the school was closing for the day. It was 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, and Aurora had been waiting in the office for over an hour. The school had tried calling Becky multiple times but got no answer. My parents immediately drove to the school to pick up Aurora. When they asked Aurora where she thought her mom was, Aurora just shrugged and said that her mom had probably forgotten. This response was heartbreaking because of how matter-of-fact Aurora was about being forgotten by her mother. My parents took Aurora home with them and continued trying to reach Becky throughout the evening. Becky finally answered her phone at nearly 11 p.m. She was clearly intoxicated and sounded confused when my mom asked about Aurora. Becky claimed that she had arranged for Aurora to go home with a friend after school, but when my mom asked for details, Becky couldn't remember which friend or provide any contact information. It turned out that Becky had gone to happy hour with Marcus and some coworkers and had completely lost track of time. She had turned her phone off because she didn't want to be bothered while she was out. She seemed genuinely surprised that the school had called my parents and couldn't understand why everyone was making such a big deal about Aurora staying late at school. My parents kept Aurora for the entire weekend because Becky said she had plans with Marcus and wouldn't be able to pick Aurora up until Monday. On Sunday evening, Becky called to say that she needed to extend her weekend plans and asked if Aurora could stay with my parents until Tuesday. When my mom asked what was so important that Becky couldn't collect her own daughter, Becky said that Marcus had invited her to go away for a couple of days and that this was important for their relationship. This was the final straw for my parents. My dad called Becky and told her that she needed to get her priorities straight and start acting like a responsible parent. He said that Aurora couldn't continue to be an afterthought in Becky's life and that her behavior was affecting Aurora's well-being and development. Becky's response was to become angry and defensive. She accused my parents of trying to turn Aurora against her and said that everyone was conspiring to make her look like a bad mother. She said that she was entitled to have a social life and that Aurora was fine staying with grandparents who actually wanted to spend time with her. The conversation escalated when my dad told Becky that her behavior reminded him of how our own father had prioritized drinking and socializing over his family responsibilities. This comparison infuriated Becky, who started screaming that she was nothing like our father and that everyone was being unfair to her. The call ended with Becky telling my parents that if they didn't approve of her parenting, they didn't have to be involved in Aurora's life. She said she would find other arrangements for Aurora and that my parents could go back to their perfect little lives without having to worry about her or her daughter. True to her word, Becky picked Aurora up on Tuesday and told my parents that they wouldn't be seeing Aurora anymore unless they apologized for interfering in her life. Since then, my parents have only seen Aurora once, when Becky dropped her off for a few hours while she went to a job interview. Even then, Becky made it clear that this was a one-time exception and that my parents shouldn't expect regular contact with Aurora anymore. The most concerning development happened 2 weeks ago when I ran into Aurora at a grocery store. She was with a woman I didn't recognize, who introduced herself as Jessica, 35F, one of Becky's co-workers. Jessica explained that she was watching Aurora while Becky was out of town for the weekend with Marcus. I asked Aurora how she was doing, and she said she was okay but seemed subdued. When I asked if she was staying with Jessica for the whole weekend, Aurora nodded and said that her mom went on trips sometimes and that different people watched her when that happened. The casual way Aurora talked about being left with various acquaintances was deeply troubling. Jessica seemed uncomfortable with my questions and quickly ended the conversation, saying they needed to finish shopping and get home. But before they left, Aurora asked me if I was still mad at her mom. When I told her that I wasn't mad at her mom but was worried about her, Aurora said that her mom had told her that Uncle Andrew didn't want to see them anymore because he didn't like the way her mom took care of her. This conversation made me realize that Becky has been manipulating Aurora's understanding of the family conflict. Instead of taking responsibility for her actions, Becky has been telling Aurora that the family rejection is about other people's problems with her parenting, not about Becky's actual behavior. I've tried reaching out to Becky multiple times since then, but she's blocked my number and won't respond to messages through other family members. She's also blocked my parents and several other relatives on social media and has been posting about toxic family members who don't support her happiness. The situation has left me feeling helpless. Aurora is clearly suffering from her mother's neglect and instability, but Becky has isolated herself and Aurora from the family members who could provide support and stability. I'm worried about Aurora's safety and well-being, but I don't know what legal options are available or whether involving authorities would make things better or worse for Aurora. My parents are heartbroken about losing contact with Aurora, and the whole family is struggling with how to handle the situation. Some relatives think we should respect Becky's wishes and stay out of her business, while others believe we have an obligation to intervene for Aurora's sake. The wedding incident that started this whole conflict now seems like a minor issue compared to the pattern of neglect and instability that has emerged. I don't regret my actions that night, but I do regret that the family conflict has made it harder for us to support Aurora during what is clearly a difficult time in her life. Update 3: This will be my final update on this situation, and I wanted to share what has happened since my last post because many people have been asking for closure on Aurora's story. About 6 weeks after my last update, I received an unexpected phone call from Aurora's school principal. She explained that the school had been monitoring Aurora's situation closely due to the ongoing attendance and behavioral concerns, and they had decided to make a formal report to Child Protective Services. The principal told me that Aurora had missed 23 days of school in the current semester, which was nearly half the school year. Aurora had also been consistently late on the days she did attend, often arriving hungry and in clothes that hadn't been washed. The school had documented multiple instances of Aurora falling asleep in class and several occasions where she had asked the cafeteria staff if she could take extra food home. The breaking point came when Aurora told her teacher that she had been staying alone overnight because her mom was visiting her boyfriend in another city. Aurora had mentioned this casually during a class discussion about weekend activities, not realizing that 8-year-olds shouldn't be left alone overnight. The teacher immediately reported this to the school administration. CPS conducted their initial investigation within 48 hours of receiving the school's report. They attempted to contact Becky multiple times but were unable to reach her. When they finally tracked her down, she was indeed out of town with Marcus and had left Aurora with a neighbor who barely knew Aurora and had no emergency contact information. The CPS worker found Aurora staying with this neighbor, who admitted that she had only agreed to watch Aurora for one night but Becky had been gone for 3 days with no communication. The neighbor was clearly overwhelmed and relieved when CPS arrived, saying she had been worried about the situation but didn't know who to contact. Becky was given 24 hours to return and meet with CPS, but she initially refused, saying she was on vacation and that the investigation was harassment. It was only when CPS explained that Aurora would be placed in emergency foster care if Becky didn't return immediately that she finally came back. The CPS investigation revealed a living situation that was much worse than any of us had realized. Becky's apartment was cluttered and dirty, with spoiled food in the refrigerator and piles of unwashed laundry throughout the house. Aurora's bedroom had no clean clothes or bedding, and there was no food in the house that didn't require cooking skills beyond 8-year-olds' abilities. During their interview with Aurora, CPS learned that Aurora had been taking care of herself for significant periods over the past several months. Aurora described making herself cereal for dinner when there was no other food, doing her own laundry in the apartment complex's machines, and walking to school by herself when Becky overslept or wasn't home in the mornings. Aurora also told CPS about the various people she had stayed with when Becky went out of town, many of whom were strangers or casual acquaintances that Aurora had never met before. The CPS worker was particularly concerned about Aurora's matter-of-fact attitude toward these arrangements, noting that Aurora seemed to view chronic neglect as normal life circumstances. Becky's response to the CPS investigation was to blame everyone else involved. She accused the school of targeting her, claimed that CPS was overreacting to normal single-parent challenges, and insisted that Aurora was mature for her age and capable of handling more independence than most children. She also blamed our family for starting the investigation out of spite over the wedding incident. However, the evidence was overwhelming. CPS determined that Aurora was being neglected and was at risk of harm if she remained in Becky's care. They offered Becky a safety plan that would allow Aurora to stay with her if Becky agreed to parenting classes, regular home visits, and having a family member serve as a safety monitor. Becky refused the safety plan, saying she wouldn't submit to harassment and supervision from people who didn't understand her situation. She also refused to allow Aurora to stay with my parents or other family members, claiming that we were all biased against her and would turn Aurora against her. With no other options, CPS placed Aurora in temporary foster care while they worked to find a kinship placement. My parents immediately applied to become Aurora's kinship caregivers, and after background checks and home evaluations, Aurora was placed with them 2 weeks later. Aurora has been living with my parents for the past 3 months, and the change in her demeanor has been remarkable. She's attending school regularly, her grades have improved dramatically, and she's started participating in activities like soccer and art classes. She's gained weight and seems more relaxed and confident than I've seen her in years. The legal process has been complicated. Becky initially fought the placement and demanded that Aurora be returned to her care. However, she failed to complete any of the requirements that would have demonstrated her ability to provide adequate care. She missed multiple court hearings, didn't attend the required parenting classes, and continued to prioritize her relationship with Marcus over her responsibilities to Aurora. The final straw came when Becky was arrested for DUI while Aurora was supposed to be in her care during a supervised visit. Becky had picked Aurora up for a court-mandated visit but had been drinking beforehand. She was pulled over with Aurora in the car, and Aurora had to be picked up from the police station by my parents. After this incident, Becky's parental rights were terminated. She had the opportunity to appeal the decision, but she never followed through with the paperwork or showed up for the scheduled hearings. My parents have now been granted permanent custody of Aurora, and they're in the process of adopting her. Becky has essentially disappeared from Aurora's life. She moved to another state with Marcus about 6 weeks ago and hasn't contacted Aurora since. She left no forwarding address and blocked all family members on social media. Aurora occasionally asks about her mom, but she doesn't seem particularly upset about the lack of contact. If anything, she seems relieved to have stability and consistency in her life. Aurora has started calling my parents grandma and grandpa instead of their first names, and she's begun referring to their house as home. She's made friends at school and seems to be thriving in an environment where she knows she'll be fed, clothed, and cared for consistently. The situation has been difficult for my parents, who are now raising a child in their 60s, but they're committed to giving Aurora the stable home she needs. Our extended family has rallied around them, providing support and helping with Aurora's care and activities. As for me, I've become much more involved in Aurora's life. I pick her up from school twice a week, help with homework, and take her to soccer practice on Saturdays. She started opening up to me about what her life was like before, and while some of her stories are heartbreaking, I'm encouraged by how resilient she is and how well she's adapting to her new situation. Looking back on everything that's happened since the wedding, I don't regret calling security that night. What seemed like an overreaction at the time was actually the first step in a process that ultimately led to Aurora getting the care and stability she needed. If I hadn't spoken up, Aurora might have continued to suffer in silence while Becky's neglect escalated. The family relationships have largely healed, though some relatives still think the situation could have been handled differently. Most family members now acknowledge that Becky's behavior was problematic and that Aurora is better off in my parents' care. The few relatives who still defend Becky have had minimal contact with Aurora, so their opinions don't significantly impact her daily life. Aurora is now 9 years old and doing well in 4th grade. She's a happy, healthy child who loves art, soccer, and spending time with her friends. She rarely mentions Becky, and when she does, it's usually in a neutral, matter-of-fact way rather than with sadness or longing. This whole experience has taught me that sometimes doing the right thing means accepting that relationships will be damaged and that there may not be a way to maintain family harmony while also protecting someone who needs help. Aurora's well-being was more important than preserving my relationship with Becky or avoiding family conflict. I hope that sharing this story helps other people who might be in similar situations. Sometimes the adults who are supposed to protect children aren't doing their job, and it takes other family members or community members to step up and advocate for the child's safety. The wedding incident seems almost trivial now compared to everything that followed, but it was the catalyst that exposed a much larger problem. If you see a child being neglected or put in dangerous situations, trust your instincts and speak up. It might feel like you're causing trouble or interfering in family business, but children can't advocate for themselves and they need adults who are willing to prioritize their safety over social comfort. Aurora will never remember much about the chaos and instability of her early childhood, but she'll grow up knowing that she has people who love her and put her needs first. That's what matters most in the end. For anyone wondering about Becky, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she and Marcus broke up about 2 months after they moved away. I don't know where she is now or what she's doing, and honestly, I don't want to know. She made her choices, and Aurora is better off without the instability and neglect that Becky brought to her life. Aurora has a bright future ahead of her, and I'm grateful that our family was able to provide her with the safety and stability she deserved all along. Sometimes the hardest thing about doing the right thing is that it takes time to see that it was actually the right choice. But watching Aurora thrive in her new environment has confirmed that every difficult decision along the way was worth it.